Title of the first section today is Review, Factoring, ax squared plus bx plus c. In this section we'll review factoring ax squared plus bx plus c, which is where you have a number or coefficient in front of x squared. First question is 2x squared minus x minus 3. When factoring, again, when you have a coefficient in front of x squared, you can still factor using the diamond or x method. The difference, instead of putting negative 3 on top of the x, will actually multiply the coefficient, the first number, times the last number, negative 3. So 2 times negative 3 will be negative 6, which will go in the top spot of the x. The middle number, if there's no number again, we can add a 1, which will be negative 1. And again, we want two numbers that multiply to get negative 6. And those same two numbers have to add to get negative 1. Those two numbers will be negative 3 and positive 2. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, and negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. The difference, again, when you have a coefficient in front of x squared, the answer is not x minus 3, x plus 2, but instead we'll rewrite the original question, 2x squared, but instead of negative 1x, we'll use the two numbers we found, negative 3x and positive 2x. Negative 3x plus 2x is the same as negative 1x, but when we bring down the extra number, negative 3, at the end, now we can solve by factoring by grouping. Factoring by grouping, again, will underline the first two terms and last two terms, and take out the greatest common factor of each. 2 and negative 3, there's no number besides 1 that goes into both of those, but they both have the same x, or same variable. So we can factor out a x, and dividing each term by an x, the 2 would stay the same. Taking a x out of x squared would be 2x, and minus 3 would stay the same, and the x would be factored out. The second two terms, 2x minus 3, again, only a positive 1 can come out. Since the negative 3 does not have an x, we cannot factor an x out, so the term would stay the same, 2x minus 3. And again, the two parentheses match up, so that's our first answer, 2x minus 3. And our second answer, the numbers or terms outside the two parentheses, x plus 1. So our final answer, the two factors, 2x minus 3 and x plus 1. Second question, and last question for the section. 8y squared minus 10y minus 3. Again, factoring when you have a coefficient in front of the variable squared, we can start by using the diamond or x method, but we'll solve the question with factor by grouping. And again, the negative 3 does not go on top of the x. When we have a number in front, we first have to multiply 8 times negative 3, and we'll have negative 24 that goes on top of the x. The middle number, negative 10. And again, we want two numbers that multiply to get negative 24, and those same numbers add to get negative 10. And those numbers will be negative 12 and positive 2. Negative 12 times 2 is negative 24, and negative 12 plus 2 is negative 10. Completing this by factor by grouping, rewriting the same equation, 8y squared, but instead of negative 10y, we'll use the numbers we found, negative 12y and plus 2y. And again, negative 12y plus 2y is the same as negative 10y. Bringing the negative 3 down, we can complete the question by factor by grouping. The first two terms, 8 and 12, the biggest number that divides into 8 and 12 would be 4. And they both have the same variable, so the greatest common factor would be 4y. 8 divided by 4 would be 2. Y squared, factoring or taking out a single y, be left with 2y. Minus sign we can bring down, and 12 divided by 4 would be 3, and the y again factors out, so we'll be left with 2y minus 3. Last two terms, 2y minus 3. There's no number besides 1 that divides both of those. Dividing by 1 would stay the same, 2y minus 3. And again, the parentheses match up, so we'll have 2y minus 3 as our first answer, and the terms on the outside, 4y plus 1. So our final answer, after factoring with a coefficient in front of y squared, is 2y minus 3 and y plus 1. Title of the last section today is Review Factoring. Ax squared plus bx plus c by guess and check. In this section, we'll factor the same questions we did before in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, but instead of using the diamond and factor by grouping, we'll factor by guess and check. First question we'll look at is 2y squared minus 11y minus 21. Again, a different way to factor, instead of using the diamond method and factor by grouping, is to guess and check. And that's guess the two parentheses or try and guess the answer, and then we'll check and see if it matches up with the correct solution. To guess and check, we want to first guess the two numbers, the first number in each parentheses that multiplies to 2y squared. 2y squared, the numbers would be 2 and 1, since 2 and 1 are the only numbers multiplied to get 2, and putting a y on each of these, 2y times 1y would be 2y squared. The second part of the guess is the guess the last two numbers that multiply to get negative 21. We can either multiply 7 times 3 or 21 times 1. We can first try 7 and 3. Since it's a negative 21, that means one number is negative and one number is positive. And again, we'll just guess and then check and see if we're correct. We can first start by guessing a positive 3 or a positive 7 and a negative 3. And again, 2y times 1y would be 2y squared. 7 times a negative 3 is negative 21. To check, we have to make sure it adds up to negative 11y. The outside terms and inside terms, we multiply those. 2y times a negative 3 would be negative 6y. And 7 times a positive 1y would be positive 7y. Negative 6y plus 7y would be 1y. 1y does not match up with negative 11y, which means this guess does not work and is not the correct solution. Guess and check again. We can take two parentheses. If we want to, we can keep 2y and y the same. The 7 and the 3 we can also keep the same. But to guess this time, we can switch the positive and negative signs, so we can make it a negative 7 and a positive 3. Checking this time, 2y times a positive 3 would be positive 6y. Negative 7 times y would be negative 7y. And this time, combining like terms, we'll have negative 1y. Negative 1y again does not match up with negative 11y, which means this is an incorrect solution, and we'll have to guess and check again. Another parentheses that we could try. 2y and y will stay the same. But this time we can switch the 3 and 7 around. We can have 3 first and 7 second. And again, one has to be positive and one has to be negative. We can check the positive 3 and negative 7 first. If that doesn't work, then we can switch the signs around. Multiplying the outside, 2y times a negative 7y, it's negative 14y. And 3 times a positive y would be positive 3y. Negative 14y plus 3y. Subtracting those would be negative 11y. Negative 11y does match up with our middle term. As long as it matches up, that means it checks out. So our correct answer is the one that we guessed, 2y plus 3 and y minus 7. Second question and last question for the section. 14 n to the third plus 23n minus 15. And again, if you wanted to, you could factor this using the diamond and factor by grouping, or we can also factor by guess and check. First guess is the numbers that multiply to get 14. And again, we can either guess 14 times 1 or 7 times 2. If we try 7n times 2n, that's one way to guess, and if these do not work out, we can go back and try the other combinations. Two numbers that multiply get 15 or negative 15 in this case. We could do 15 times 1 or 5 times 3. Again, just to guess and check, you guess and see if it works out correctly. We can first try 15 and 1. Since it's negative 15, means one number is negative, one number is positive. And again, just by guessing, see if it works out. We'll try negative 15 first and positive 1 second. To check and see if it matches up, this time it has to add up to 23n when we multiply the outside terms and the inside terms. 7n times a positive 1n would be 7n, and negative 15 times 2n, negative 15 times 2 would be negative 30, and n would stay the same. Combining these, 7n minus 30n would be negative 23n. Negative 23n is not the same as positive 23n. So if it's not the same, not exactly the same, this answer does not work out. And again, guess and check. You can either guess completely new numbers, or we can take the one that we had before and change a few numbers around. If we leave 7n and 2n the same, we can also leave 15 and 1 the same. But to guess another answer, we can switch the negatives and positives. So this time we'll make it a positive 15 and a negative 1. Multiplying the outside terms, 7n times a negative 1 would be negative 7n, and 15 times a positive 2n would be 30n. And combining negative 7n plus 30n, it's the same as 30 minus 7, would be 23n. This time 23n does match up with our middle terms. So if it does match up again, that's the correct solution. So our final answer would be 7n plus 15 and 2n minus 1.